That is quite a little bop. I love it. My head is going. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim Courvoisier. I am the Director of Content Marketing here at Lob and the author of the State of Direct Mail Consumer Insights Report. I'm excited to be here and share some of the key findings with you today. And I'm also lucky enough to be joined by two awesome industry experts. So let's start with some introductions. First up is Kate Siebold, Senior Customer Success Manager at Lob. And when Kate isn't working hand in hand with our customers, she's attempting to cook 52 new recipes this year. That's one a week, Kate. Is that right?
Well, it really ends up being sometimes multiple a week and then a dead week or two when we, eat out more. But yeah.
So of these recipes that you're cooking, I have to ask, what's been your favorite so far?
I have a terrible sweet tooth. And so the ones I always enjoy most are like of the cookie and cake variety. I actually tried a new chocolate cake for my husband's birthday yesterday. And I have to say, maybe there's some recency bias here, but it was really delicious.
I love it. And I will absolutely volunteer to be your taste tester any day, especially in that cookie, cake, sweet category. I'm right there with you. So next up, we have Hannah Pucci, Director of Consulting and Primary Research at Comperemedia. And she also has a Wine and Spirit Education Trust Level 3 Award in wine. That sounds super fancy. So I have to ask you, Hannah, what's your favorite variety of wine?
Oh, it's a tricky question and really hard for me to pick, but I'd have to say Pinot Noir is my tried and true favorite, but I've really been loving exploring port recently. So trying to branch out.
And do you have a favorite winery?
I do. Turnbull Winery in California is my top winery right now.
Yay, California. Well, I like to say my favorite winery is any winery that has wine. So, but I'm also a Pinot Noir fan. So I picked some good people to have this webinar with. We've got cookies and cake and wine. So let's get right into our webinar, shall we, before I digress? Today, we're going to look at some of the key findings and actionable insights from the consumer's point of view about direct mail. As marketers and direct mail practitioners, these insights are invaluable. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them into the QA located in your Zoom navigation bar, and we'll get to as many of the questions as we can at the end. Following the webinar, we'll also send you a copy of the report, as well as a recorded version of today's session. So you can just sit back today and enjoy the conversation. Now I'm going to hand it over to Hannah, and she's going to tell us how this report was put together. Hannah, over to you.
Thanks, Kim. For the State of Direct Mail Consumer Insights Report, we interviewed just over 2,000 U.S. consumers aged 18 and over. Our respondents were nationally representative of the U.S. in terms of age, gender, income, ethnicity, and region. This report was produced based on answers provided to a 15-minute survey that was consisting of just about 50 questions. These questions focused on preferences and satisfaction levels related to direct mail, and we'll of course dive through all those great findings today.
Thanks, Hannah. So from this massive survey, we took all these data points and we distilled them down into 6 key findings that you see reflected on this slide. These findings and many more will serve as our topic of conversation today. And in the full report, you'll have lots and lots of other takeaways. So let's dive right in. From the looks of the data points here, consumers really take their trip to the mailbox seriously. I know working from home during the pandemic, just getting up out of my chair and going down to the mailbox was a treat, right? So consumers either read their direct mail right away, like as they're walking in from the mailbox, or nearly immediately. So Kate, I'm going to throw this question over to you. Are you surprised by this behavior? And what insights can a direct mail practitioner glean from this finding?
Sure, happy to answer this one. I have to start by saying no, I think it's not particularly surprising to see that almost 3/4 of recipients read direct mail when they bring it inside their home. And this is largely because human behavior drives going through the mail. I mean, Kim, you talked about how a trip to the mailbox felt like a treat in COVID. And, personally, I always pick up the mail and shuffle through the things that come in a given day. I make piles of items that are important or that I need to respond to, or maybe that can just be recycled right away because they don't particularly apply to me. And we find that people care about direct mail for a number of reasons. First, of course, is digital exhaustion. We know that the average consumer receives 157 emails across 5 email inboxes every single day. And beyond that, people see an average of 3,000 to 4,000 digital ads each day. And that is a lot of stuff to take in and to think about. But by contrast, you might get 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of mail in your mailbox each day that are in that important or actionable pile that you might make after you go to the mailbox. And so that gives you more time to consider it and think about it. It takes less brain space to think about and therefore is more impactful overall. So it's because of those types of behaviors we find that direct mail drives stronger purchase intent among consumers overall.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And even this notion of like triaging, right? Like we call it triaging our inbox when we go through and we kind of like get rid of the non-essential stuff and just keep the stuff and maybe I'll come back and read it. And you kind of do that when you're going through your direct mail too, right? Like you were talking about making these piles. Now I want to shift to the next insight that's a little bit about like relationship building, right? So let's go there. With customer acquisition costs on the rise, direct mail is being used, strategically, which we love, as part of omnichannel campaigns to keep existing customers engaged. It's used to encourage advocacy and grow the customer base and offset churn, which is a constant problem, right? This key finding tells us that consumers see direct mail as a great way to get to know brands and to build relationships with them. So Kate, I want to unpack this one with you as well. With this constantly kind of changing macroeconomic conditions that we're all struggling through or dealing with, how can direct mail practitioners effectively use direct mail to build relationships with consumers?
Totally. And I know that the constantly changing macroeconomic conditions are especially top of mind right now, given the news and everything that's happening in the world. The one kind of asterisk or caveat that I want to put in front of this question is that the current economic situation is still very much unfolding. And so what we've seen right now is that there hasn't actually been time for marketers to pivot portfolios or strategies just yet. It's far more likely that the current conditions will affect budgets in 2023 rather than current budgets that have already been locked in. But what we do know for this given year is that year over year, direct mail spending is up. It was originally projected to account for almost 5% of marketing budgets in 2022, but we're actually seeing in practice that it's accounting for closer to 10.5% across all industries, which is big. We also know that direct mail is here to stay. We've seen that there was almost $42 billion spent on direct mail in 2021, which is massive. But getting back to your original question, Kim, and around the current environment, we believe that what's going on right now will influence marketers going forward to follow campaign results even more closely than they have in the past. After all, it's far more difficult to fight for budget when dollars are really tight overall. And so, as a result, it's more important than ever to prove out the value of each channel, and even beyond that, to think about and prove how channels can work together in tandem for maximum results.
For sure. And especially, when you are building a relationship with a consumer, right? If you start that from the get-go in their customer journey and you get them to be loyal and you get them to be engaged, it just builds that strong, lasting relationship that we're all trying to do no matter what channel that we're using. As a marketer, I'm all about using my most productive channels, really strategically to drive results. So that leads us really nicely into our next key takeaway, which is conversion. So conversion, or the action taken on a direct mail piece, is what most of us are trying to get to when we send direct mail, right? We're not just sending it for like happy times. So this key finding is super interesting because it proves that the majority of consumers are inspired to take some sort of action after reading a piece of direct mail, which leads us nicely into our next key finding, which talks about what motivates them to take an action. And before we go, I was going to say, any guesses on what motivates them to take action? And we showed it to you. We did the reveal. So if you guess that offers and promotions were key motivators, then you guessed correctly, right? Which is why you see offers in direct mail pieces that convert into revenue. So Kate, I got another one for you. Can you share the types of offers or promotions that are most successful that you're seeing?
Totally. And I wish I had a silver bullet, like one special particular offer that I could share with everyone that would absolutely knock it out of the park, regardless of industry or form factor or what have you. But really what we see at Lob with the customers that I work with is that the most successful promotions, are action oriented. And ideally, there is some personalization there to the consumer's previous behavior. So what you might see in a promotion is something that a consumer might have had in their cart and then abandoned that cart, or to what they have purchased in the past, or to something that they've interacted with on a website. Maybe they spent a lot of time on a given page, but didn't actually move through and make a purchase. So rather than kind of one particular promotion specifically, what we've consistently seen is that the success of a promotion is less about that offer or promotion being so amazing that a person can't pass it up, but rather about how relevant that promotion is to the person who's receiving it.
Yeah, major. So relevancy is king, right? And it's like that right offer at the right time to that right person. And that's like the kind of the like silver bullet you were talking about. So it's not about that one offer. It's going to like always hit, right? It's about hitting that right person when they're like primed to purchase. So that leads us into our next key finding, number 5. And, you know, it's around this, something that we don't talk a lot about when we talk about direct mail, which is why I love this key finding. And, you know when I get a great offer, I like to tell people about it because we all love getting a deal on something we need or want. And it looks like I'm not alone. What I find so interesting here is that the shareability of morality that we don't often discuss. So Hannah, you might be feeling left out, so I want to bring you into the conversation here. Can you tell us a bit more about the data associated with this key finding that people share direct mail?
Absolutely. We found that almost 8 in 10 consumers mentioned sharing direct mail with friends and family, with 1 in 10 saying that they share it very often. We find that younger consumers are actually more likely to share direct mail compared to those consumers 55 and over. So sending them the offers and promotion might not be relevant to them, but it may be relevant to their friends and family that they are sharing with.
For sure. And I bet majority of folks that are on this call today have shared some type of offer with someone. We'd like to too. That's like a friendly thing to do. You're like, hey, did you see this, deal at Bath and Body Works? You can get candles for $13.50 this weekend. That's awesome. So I want to talk about our next key finding, which has to do with a natural resource, which often comes up when we discuss direct mail. We're keenly aware of the impact of using natural resources like paper, and many of us have sustainability goals and initiatives. So I'm interested in how critical it is, though, from the consumer point of view. So Hannah, what does the consumer data from the report tell us here?
The survey results found that the majority of consumers only opt into paperless statements for some brands or a limited number of brands. Paperless statements are more common among younger consumers, but 3/4 of those 18 to 24 specifically report they do still receive some paper statements from brands.
So this is definitely not an all or nothing, right? It's not like I get no paper statements or I get all paper statements. It's really somewhere in the middle. So Kate, how can direct mail practitioners use this data?
Sure. So I can totally echo this on the ground with the customers that I work with, and I'm seeing a lot, especially in financial services and healthcare. There is a movement to make things more digital, like Hannah mentioned. But we're still seeing a lot of paper statements being sent, like the survey found. And so something that I've been encouraging direct mail practitioners to think about when it comes to something like a statement, something that will be opened and something that people will be paying attention to, think about how you can use the rest of the real estate on a page or a piece of paper to instill stickiness or an additional brand message. So to continue with the statement example, is there an opportunity to add a marketing or a cross-sell message somewhere in the copy? Or maybe you want to think about adding imagery at the top of the page. This could be something like a history of a person's spending, or a FICO score, or an offer, again, that's very specific to them, things like that. These types of things will contribute to the overall engagement with a piece, especially when you know that somebody's going to be opening it and paying very close attention to what's on the page.
I love that. And I'm seeing that more and more, even if you look at like your credit card statements, right? They may have a cross sell or an upsell or some type of offer or another message in there. So it's really about using kind of every inch of space strategically and not to let that go to waste, but then also not trying to cram so much on a page that you can't see anything. And we're going to talk about some things you can do to increase readability later on in this webinar. So I really appreciate those insights. So now we're going to look at a few insights by age group, with our three buckets being 18 to 34, 35 to 54, and 55 plus. So Hannah, how would you interpret the data that we show here with consumers 18 to 34 preferring to receive letters? I found that really interesting.
Absolutely. While consumers overall do choose catalogs and magazines as their preferred direct mail format, we do see younger consumers specifically showing particular interest in letters and envelopes. This could potentially be due to the assumption that these types of direct mail pieces contain important information or maybe even relevant information to where they are in their life stage. So some examples include credit card approvals, maybe information on that college acceptance. So really important information here for them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And we talk about this a lot, right? And you'll see this when you get the report and looking at all the insights by demographic of like age and stage and life cycle, where you are in like your customer journey, and aligning kind of the format of your mail piece to that, the messaging, the images, all of that, which leads us nicely into our next insight. So Kate, this one's for you. Design and copy are really important elements of any direct mail piece, and it has to capture that attention. So regardless of age, but we're seeing it especially among ages 18 to 34. So what advice do you have for direct mail practitioners here looking to, have their direct mail piece capture that attention and stand out?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things here. The first is that direct mail creative can and should relate to your overall brand identity. So make sure that whatever design is on your mail piece ties in with the types of things that your recipients are seeing in other channels as well. In fact, we've seen that design of a mail piece accounts for up to 35% of a campaign's success. The rest of those determining factors are things like list selection, timing of the campaign, et cetera. But the other big call out here is that millennials and Gen Z are more receptive to direct mail than ever, and I think probably than any of us might have guessed. We know that 90% of millennials believe that direct mail is reliable, and that 64% of both Gen Z and millennials prefer receiving offers via mail. So really, this is not so much a question of a letter versus a postcard, but actually more about the fact that creative now has more power than ever before to create and curate an omni-channel marketing approach using multiple platforms. So again, I realize I may sound like a bit of a broken record here, but offers that folks are receiving need to be inspiring and authentic and personalized. And that's really agnostic of form factor or the vehicle in which they're receiving these offers. And as always, testing is really key in order to see what works best for a given brand and a given offer.
Yeah, this is absolutely spot on. And I mean, think about it in the world that we live in today, when you think about design and copy, and there's entire social media networks that exist that are just imagery, right? Look at Instagram and the engagement there, and look at TikToks with all the videos. And so like imagery is so, so important, which leads us into postcards, which are, personally one of my favorite mail formats. And, it's super relatable, this stat, because this is my checkbox, so to speak. I won't tell you where in this checkbox I am, 35 to 54, but it's my checkbox. So I'm curious what insights that we would infer from this data point, Hannah.
Sure. While 35 to 54-year-old consumers are interested in receiving other forms of direct mail compared to other age cohorts, they do show particular interest in receiving postcards, especially from brands they already have that relationship with. Our assumption here is that this group is time-starved. They have family, career, friends, and more. They need quick information that they're able to get very fast.
Yes, again, so relatable, quick, easy, easily digestible. So, Kate, we see postcards as a popular, format here across all age demographics. Why do you think they perform so well as a direct mail format in general?
Yeah, I'm going to really echo what both you, Kim, and Hannah have said so far. And I think that to even extrapolate further, this goes back to how many emails folks receive. Many people don't really interact with email, but they do interact with direct mail. And again, I'll go back to that image of me like sorting my, daily mail into different piles on my countertop. But really the takeaway here too is that the more personalized things are, not only do those personalized pieces look more interesting, obviously it actually is more interesting because it relates directly to you, the recipient. And postcards are a really great place to do this as they allow for a lot of branded, engaging, action-oriented content. We all use email at work, and so email feels like work, but direct mail really has the opportunity to feel more special, especially now that it can be easily personalized with eye-catching graphics and images and things like that.
And you actually just brought something back as I was listening to you talk, and it like reminded me of the nostalgia of postcards as well. And I might be dating myself here, but when we were kids and we go on a trip or vacation, like the first thing you always did was like buy a postcard, right? On your first day of your trip and send it to people. And it just felt special, right? And it was like you got her a postcard, like, oh, grandma's in Hawaii. This is amazing. So I think there's a nostalgic element to it too, and it feels special. So that leads us into a little bit about, like we were talking about earlier, relationship building. And so when I look at the stat here, if I'm over 35, I'm more likely to read or take action on direct mail from brands that I know and I may have done business with. Is that right, Hannah?
That's correct. When compared to younger consumers, those aged 35 plus are more likely to engage with direct mail pieces from brands that they have that relationship with. Consumers aged 18 to 54 are more likely than those 55 plus to engage with brands they do not know and brands they are aware of but do not have a relationship with as well.
Right on. That's, again, so insightful. So listeners should definitely check out the full report for more demographic insights because there's heaps of them. But now we're going to take a deeper look at how consumers take action on direct mail, as we spoke about a little bit earlier, and then what motivates them. So as we heard in our key findings section at the beginning of the webinar, direct mail inspires 62% of consumers to take action. So let's unpack some more insights around that. Hannah, can you share some of the related data points here that would be most relevant for listeners?
Of course, when it comes to images, consumers find images of an item, brand, or service they have previously purchased to be most appealing. They are also interested in images that include events or locations that are local to them. Although personalization is expected by consumers, it's not alone enough to inspire action. So we'll of course want to understand not only what other factors drive action, but where consumers would go when they're taking that action. I'll pass it back to you, Kim, to take us through that on the next few slides.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the nuances in the actions that consumers have with the direct mail will depend on where they are in their customer journey, right? We've talked about this a little bit. So Hannah, can you share how consumers act on direct mail when they're interested in learning more about a brand?
Absolutely. Despite the pandemic and online commerce options, 1 in 4 consumers would visit a store if they wanted to learn more about a brand. Overall, consumers are most likely to visit a brand website or search for the brand online. Those under 35 typically search for the brand online and check the brand's social media page. So very important to keep that updated.
Yeah, this is so interesting, right? And it also speaks to the fact that like brick and mortar is not dead. As much as we want to think that, Amazon rules the roost and, no one's shopping at malls anymore, we still see 24% of people are visiting a store if one exists. So that's super interesting. So now I want to like go back to, Kate or myself, leaving our desk chair, walking down to our mailbox and thinking about when we get that piece of direct mail in our hand. One of the first actions that we take is to read it. And certain factors will influence that decision, whether or not we're going to read it, right? When we're triaging it. So as you can see here on this slide, and then if we click to the next slide, see what that next action would be. So Kate, in looking at all these great stats, how can we increase the readability factor of our direct mail pieces?
For sure. So I think that the big call out here, and something that I am seeing on both of the examples that are on the slide, is that simplicity is key. So I'm encouraging folks all the time to use less copy on their mail pieces and make better use of white space in order to really draw special and particular attention to a call to action. So really the theme here is to increase readability by giving folks less to read. Go figure.
Yeah, and that could be a real balancing act, right? Because you have a lot of, departments and teams that have a vested interest in the mail piece being successful. So you have marketing, you have sales, you have legal who wants to add a whole huge block of copy with all the legalese. So like you said, kind of less is more, and really making sure that the most important elements do stand out. And I love that on this example here on this postcard, right? Like you've got these really eye-catching images on the right side. That's where your eye naturally goes. You have a QR code, which is super easy to scan. And I think QR codes have made, a massive comeback during the pandemic, before like they were really kind of falling away. And then all the menus went on to QR codes, and they've had an absolute resurgence. So this is a really nice example. So you've sent the direct mail piece. I'm kind of going on this little journey here, the breadcrumb trail. The consumer reads it. So now what? According to our research, most will visit a brand website as their primary activity. And when you look at this and break it down by age bracket, it gets super interesting. So Hannah, can you tell us about some of the most interesting activity variations by age?
We find that those 18 to 34 are much more likely to look up reviews of whatever is being highlighted. So the brand, product, or service compared to those who are 35 or older. These younger consumers are also just as likely as mentioned to search for a brand online as they are to visit the brand's website directly. So of course, providing clear, simple options for different audiences to drive that action is going to be very key.
Absolutely. Well, now it's time to get a little bit more personal. So let's talk about personalization. This report really backs up what we think we know about it. Consumers want personalized experiences, and that includes direct mail. So if you're only scratching the surface today, using first name, it's really time to double down on your efforts so you can build those strong relationships that engage your customers throughout their customer journey. We've been talking about how consumers take action with direct mail and some of the elements that motivate them to do so. And we talked a smidge about this earlier. As direct mail practitioners, we spend a ton of time, nailing the copy, getting that creative and the offers for our mail pieces. And this data shows the importance of images, and specifically images around the items that the consumer may have recently purchased, or a local event, or a location close to them. I thought this was so interesting, and we see a lot of this. So Kate, can you give us an example, maybe from a real life customer, of how a direct mail practitioner might put this information into like real life?
Sure. So we have a customer at Lob called iExit app. And if you are a big road tripper, you might already be familiar with this phone app. But essentially, iExit shows where a person's business is in relation to an exit on the freeway or the interstate, as it pertains to other businesses. So iExit app uses Lob to send hyper-personalized letters to businesses on these given exits to prove the value of their advertising. They actually include a ton of personalized images and details about that business specifically. We see things like a preview image of the business's sponsorship on the app, the number of customers of theirs that opened the app within a certain radius of that interstate exit, how many clicks the business had on its listing before they were even paying to advertise on the app, as well as what iExit users were searching for when they opened the app and came across the person's business. So it's super personalized. It includes images. It includes a lot of really nitty-gritty, detailed data about a particular business to hopefully encourage those businesses to sign on with iExit and even further capitalize on that. So that is a very detail-heavy example. I will say, though, kind of more generally, in the last 15 years, as I alluded to a couple of minutes ago, the amount of copy on direct mail has gone down. And this is really about knowing your brand and your use case and your end recipients really well. So we're seeing things like on that postcard a couple of slides ago, leveraging white space and imagery versus a super text-heavy item. This is because humans actually process images 60,000 times faster than they do text. So back to that item of, giving your folks less to read to increase readability. However, some brands, because they know their end recipients, like to put a lot of that info in letters because their consumers are really looking for that. This is the iExit example. So again, it's about know thyself, know yourself, know your brand, know what you're trying to encourage consumers to do, and think about not only the offer, but how the offer is placed, how easy it is to find, how quickly the reader can determine how to take advantage of that offer to bring them on board.
Yeah, that's a great example. And I learned about iExit when we did a case study with them. And I remember learning that they had done a month of cold calling before they had ever used direct mail. And it was not successful, let's say that, the cold calling effort. But what the cold calling effort taught them was all of the questions that, their prospects would have. And so they took those questions and distilled them into their direct mail letter. And so it was like a proving ground, and they hit the ground running nearly immediately because they already knew the questions that, their prospects would have, and were able to include that in the letter, as well as that imagery, right, of the exit and all of those things that would be super engaging. And, obviously this slide has this stat around, an image of an item that I've previously purchased. That absolutely would grab my attention if I'm looking through my direct mail, right? It's like, oh, here's this, blouse that you bought from Vici like last month. It's like, oh, we have, now the jeans that go with it. So super smart, strategy and tactic. In the report, we also have an entire industry section that has insights about, the most read mail format, the type most likely to read, the action most likely to take, and it's all broken out. So if you're retail or financial services, healthcare, or your local business, you can see all of those rich insights. So I definitely suggest that you check that out when you get to dig into the report after this webinar or when you have time. So now we're going to briefly look at consumer perceptions around the frequency of communications and satisfaction. So Hannah, since you're the data lady on the call, can you tell us a bit more about the correlation between frequency and satisfaction?
Sure. So consumers who describe the frequency of communications they receive as the right amount are significantly more likely to be satisfied with that amount of communications that they receive. Of course, they probably feel they are getting all the information they need without having too much. This is true for not only communications overall, but for specifically email and direct mail.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is, so if I get what I perceive to be the right amount, I'm doing air quotes, right amount, then I'm satisfied. But of course, that amount, right amount, is going to vary from person to person. And this is a theme that you're seeing kind of ongoing throughout this webinar, right? It's personalized. Each person is different. So, while these are data points and key insights, there is no one size fits all. So on this slide, 66% who receive the right amount of direct mail from brands are satisfied with that amount. This is compelling, and it's really interesting for us as direct mail professionals. So Kate, how do you think that direct mail differentiates from email here?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to think about is the fact that you're not picking up and sorting through hundreds of direct mail pieces every day, right? Like you might be doing with email. Speaking purely for myself, and I know some of my friends are in similar boats, I have an entire email alias exclusively for like spam junk email that I receive. That tells you really how inundated people feel with this kind of spray and pray approach that sometimes marketers take when it comes to email. What we're seeing with direct mail is that marketers are getting smarter about how they're reaching out to people in the mailbox. It's more mindful. I think specifically, we have a Lob customer that's a meal delivery service, and they send reactivation campaigns via direct mail. So for this customer, direct mail specifically drove 20% of conversions for them at a 263% higher conversion rate than their similar email campaigns. So what this really means is that this allows them to send direct mail to a smaller, higher value audience segment of Lob's customers. And of course, they use Lob, and so it's easier than ever to tie back responses to a particular direct mail piece so that they can really easily quantify results.
That's all so true. I can't tell you how many times that I've signed up for an email list from a retailer I like. And, the next thing I know, I have a barrage of emails from them every day. And sometimes, unfortunately, that can make you go from liking a brand and being engaged and being like, yeah, I want to sign up for your email list, to all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I cannot do this, and unsubscribe. So consumers are feeling the pain, right? And perhaps the inbox is the new junk mail for those that feel like they get too many emails. So, hey, this is not a kind of head-to-head battle of like direct mail versus email. One is good, one is bad. That's not at all kind of the message here. So I'd love for you to tell us a bit about how you can use direct mail with your email strategy to increase response rates, like you were saying, or address maybe those who have unsubscribed.
For sure. It's definitely not a head-to-head grudge match between direct mail and email. But the reality is that every brand experiences increased email opt-out rates, and it's really more difficult now than ever to reach people with email or even with SMS. And so with that in mind, if you have somebody's mailing address and their email address, there is a ton of power in pairing them together. In fact, we've seen that a response rate to a campaign is 26% higher if a direct mail piece is sent as a follow-up to a digital display ad. Furthermore, we know that brand recall is 40% higher if a direct mail piece follows an email. We've seen overall that direct mail drives 63% lift in overall omnichannel performance. And what that really means is that an omnichannel campaign that does not include direct mail would have 63% lower results. This is largely because direct mail pieces stay in the home longer. They hang around more. You have more time to consider them and think about them. And so I love seeing customers, Lob customers and companies that I work with, pair these two channels or many different channels together to see increased conversion for their customers.
So true. And I spent, a decade in email marketing, and now I find myself on the direct mail side of the house. And there's a song I like called Peanut Butter Jelly. And I'd like to liken it that, email and direct mail are like peanut butter and jelly. They go better together. So let's move on and talk about our next and probably our last key insight here. And that's that, we often talked about how direct mail can be used as part of omnichannel, as you just said, Kate, right? Not as a standalone tactic. And in our State of Direct Mail Marketers report that we released earlier this year, we found that only 5% of marketers are using direct mail as a standalone tactic, right? That's great. We're not just trying to do everything in one basket. When you use multiple channels together throughout the customer journey, you'll be better able to acquire, engage, build loyalty, and retain customers. As we've said, there is no one size fits all. There's no one channel that's best. It's about using your most effective channels in combination with each other to get results. So take a little breath here. Been really action-packed. So let's recap where we started from our key results. Direct mail's come a long way from that junk mail label that it carried years ago, largely in part from direct mail professionals like the ones here today, transforming it from direct mail to intelligent mail. It's data-driven, it's targeted, and it's optimized for conversion. We're all grown up as a channel. Consumers expect personalized experiences at every touch point, so we need to give them what they want, from the format to the images, copy, and the offers that will motivate them to take action. Intelligent direct mail puts the power to build lasting relationships with your customers right in your hands and their mailboxes. The State of Direct Mail Consumer Insights Report contains a lot more information that will help you use direct mail more effectively to reach your target audience. So I'm just going to sum it all up right now and say the future has never looked brighter for marketers or intelligent direct mail. So I think it might be time to bust out those cookies, Kate, and the wine, Hannah. But before we do that, let's see if we can answer a couple of questions. Okay, let's see. I have one coming up here. Okay, I'm going to read this out. Pardon me reading it, but we saw earlier that design and copy are important to those aged 18 to 34. So how did people aged 35 plus respond to design and copy? Hannah, do you want to grab this one?
Sure, Kim. It's a great question, as it's always important to look at all our age groups here. This is important to about 1 in 5 of those 35 plus, with this group more focused on offers or promotions, as well as having previous interest in the product, but definitely not a reason to forego design and copy to that 35 plus age group.
For sure. I think we have time. Let's see, one more question. Kate, I'm going to give you a good one, a spicy one. Have you seen any of your customers increase the ROI of their direct mail campaigns by putting these consumer insights into effect? Kate, take us away.
Yeah, totally. So this is something, of course, after a customer that I work with sends a direct mail campaign, this is always my number one question for them, frankly. And we see overall, yes, of course, ROI is increased if the more data that we have and the more that we can leverage it to make smart choices. The fact that Lob makes it easy to bring in personalized images or data into each mail piece is huge. And so knowing, as we saw earlier, that a little bit over half of consumers expect a direct mail piece to be personalized and have information that's especially relevant to them, the ability to pull in that personalized information super seamlessly is key. And then for the other half who don't necessarily expect mail to be personalized, what an awesome surprise that they will find in their mailbox when a piece is tailored to them. So that's one thing. The other thing I think about is, again, kind of what we spoke about during the latter part of our chat here, and that's about leveraging that multi-channel or omni-channel approach when it comes to direct mail marketing. So I definitely see folks increase ROI when they pair direct mail with a digital ad or another type of ad to make their outreach even more impactful.
That's awesome. And, ROI is obviously my favorite metric as a marketer and the way that we prove, right? And 67% of marketers said that direct mail provides the highest ROI of any channel they're using. So there's the proof in the pudding. So those were great questions. Really appreciate them. And if there are any that we weren't able to answer, we'll definitely follow up with email to the responses. Before we wrap up, I'm going to launch a quick poll to see if you'd like to learn more about Lob's direct mail automation platform that will transform your direct mail into intelligent mail at scale. I'd like to thank you all for coming and thank our amazing speakers for their incredible insights. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Hannah. So keep your eyes peeled for your copy of the recording and the State of Direct Mail Consumer Insights Report. Until next time, happy mailing.